And I will get started. Greetings to all of you. My name is Brian Jackson, Victor Echo 6 Juliet Bravo Juliet. I am the RAC Youth Education Program Chair. I'm currently in Lethbridge, Alberta, but home is Airdrie, Alberta for me. Before I begin our conversation today with amateur radio and youth, I want to say a huge thank you to Alan Griffin, our marketing communications director. He has been outstanding and given me a hand getting everything ready for today. Our session is going to have a COVID focus, kind of what YEP did pre-COVID, what the program looked like, what has gone on during COVID and the changes that we had to make to the program, and then some anticipation of what the YEP will look like post-COVID and trying to get back to normal, and hopefully an opportunity to share some of the ideas that we've got, but also an opportunity for you to share any ideas that you might have for the youth education program. Before COVID happened, we had traditionally a very school-based approach. We looked at what schools did with amateur radio. I was brought into the program and worked with Neil Carlton, Victor Echo 3, November Charlie Echo in Almont, Ontario. And we did classroom to classroom type activities that related to our existing curriculum. We were both grade 6 teachers and we tied things in from our classroom to each classroom, mostly via IRLP. However, we found that over a number of years, as people retired and as program supporters moved from school to school, that our program began to fade. Right now, there is only one school in the program, but we've had to focus our shift to areas where youth would need radio outside of a school setting. And we've approached a variety of community groups. And right now our program consists of a variety of scout, cadet, and guide groups that are very interested in incorporating amateur radio into their program. What I like about the youth education program is that not only do we provide ideas to youth groups and to school groups for ways that they can use radio, but as a member of the youth education program, those groups are also able to propose ideas for ways that they can advance their group skills, perhaps advance the group's radio equipment levels, and they have the opportunity to propose projects that we could potentially help them fund within our organization. It's an exciting opportunity to see what those groups can think of, and then do our best to find some funds from donations generated through the youth education program to be able to support them in their work. One moment, I seem to be stuck here. There we go. So perhaps the most exciting part of what our program offers is the opportunity to participate in the Amateur Radio on the International Space Station program, where our members, when it's their turn, get a chance to talk to astronauts in space. And that is a real keystone and a real highlight to our program. As of this point in time, Canadians have had 98 contacts, either a direct contact where they set up amateur radio equipment within their facility, or a telebridge in which they use a telephone line to connect their school group up to a ground station. And there are a number of ground stations around the earth. And then that ground station draws the radio signal from the station and shares it back with the school group. Or as we'll talk about in a little bit, what we call a multipoint telebridge, which is one of the changes that the AIRS program had to undergo thanks to some of the COVID experiences. I'm part of the AIRS mentorship team as well, and have proudly brought those 98 contacts over the years from a variety of astronauts, but a real highlight with our Canadian astronaut program. First of all, Bob Thirsk, twice with Canadian Chris Hadfield, and most recently with David St. Jacques. Even though the other astronauts that are on board the station support Canadian contacts, a real increase in the frequency of contacts and a real thrill for Canadian students to be able to talk to their own Canadian astronauts. On top of our 98 contacts, we've also participated in 17 what we call terrestrial training sessions, in which astronauts in training from Johnson Space Center have the opportunity to act as if they were on board station, use their radio skills with students who have prepared questions, have the chance to simulate as if they were on board the station. It is one of the rare opportunities for kids to speak to astronauts in training, and then perhaps later get an opportunity to speak to that actual astronaut while they are on board on station. We had an opportunity in my school to do exactly that. Spoke to Chris Cassidy in training, and as well as one of our Canadians in training, and then had an opportunity to speak to Chris while he was on orbit. Proudly, our contacts are available in all provinces and territories. There is a really huge focus on trying to get in our northern territories, try to bring in kids who are in very remote areas across the country in order to increase their exposure to space and to amateur radio and the things that they could look forward to from their remote areas. We found lately that our mentorship in the AIRS program also includes South America, and we are picking up a number of South American contacts to be included in our Canadian programs. One of the most exciting activities from a student group outside of AIRS is the inclusion of high altitude balloons in their activities and in their program plans. The idea is for a group to design a payload that can be flown into the stratosphere on board a helium or hydrogen filled weather balloon, takes the payload package up in excess of 30 to 31 to 32 kilometers into the stratosphere. We use APRS and other amateur radio frequencies to track it. And then once that balloon bursts and returns to Earth, and the students get an opportunity to recover that payload box. If they had a scientific experiment, to retrieve the results of their scientific experiment, or in some cases, simply just looking for the amazing pictures that you can see, as in the upper left-hand corner of this slide, when you get above the cloud bank and start to see the curvature of the Earth. It really is a thrill for kids to do. And as a teacher, I'm especially excited by the opportunities that I can include some atmospheric research into the work that I do in the classroom. Perhaps it's just pictures, perhaps it's just tracking, maybe it's just increasing their interest in science and the idea of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. It really can be anything that the kids want. I like the fact that these high altitude balloons have the opportunity to connect communities together, perhaps in some kind of a group research opportunity. Perhaps it's like they did with Shaftesbury in Winnipeg and other schools in Manitoba, to do some joint activities, some joint experiments, and then have the opportunity to compare the results that come after the balloons have been recovered. Please make sure that if you can stick around this afternoon, don't miss Kelly Schulman's presentation about the high altitude balloon project that she incorporated in Ontario. really thrilling to see how kids are using radio in order to be able to broaden their experiences and their interest in science and amateur radio as well. We noticed that the idea of satellite communications took on a real youth focus before COVID, where university and other non-commercial groups around the world started to develop these smaller satellites called CubeSats. Students learned how to design and operate those satellites. They conducted experiments that didn't always have to have a commercial objective to them. They relied on amateur radio communications in order to be able to monitor the health of the satellites, send data back down to the Earth on the health of the experiment that they were conducting. They were able to operate the communication systems after they had gotten their own amateur radio call sign, past the qualification exams. It was very interesting to see that the idea of CubeSats were really gaining some momentum across the country. Exciting for us here in Alberta, because the University of Alberta in Edmonton were the very first university level CubeSat project, X-Alta 1, in 2018. Around 30 students started off the journey into their work with amateur radio satellites. Now there are about 15 that are being designed as part of the Canadian Space Agency's university CubeSat program. They will all use amateur radio communications in order to maintain the connection between the CubeSat and the ground. Very interesting to see how not only is the work of youth, which generally we've considered from elementary grades up into high school, but now their interest in amateur radio is now being carried into university levels. And that's a nice touch, one that I'm excited as the youth education program chair to see. Perhaps you're familiar with the Canada C3 expedition that used the Whisper program, the Whisper beacons, one-way communication, opportunity for students, for youth to be able to understand how radio signals are propagated as a part of Canada's 150th on the Polar Prince. The C3, which is coast to coast to coast, journeyed from Toronto to Victoria through the Northwest Passage, and youth across the country were able to follow their progress as a weak signal propagation reporting system, and share their experiences, share their stories. We're also able to share the opportunities that they were able to track that beacon. Really created a lot of interest in learning about the low power opportunities of signal propagation. And I saw a lot of their comments on the social media following the success of this C3 program. Most recently, last summer, the Canadawide Science Fair was held. This year, unfortunately, they had to cancel it due to COVID, but we participated in the Canadawide Science Fair as a program, an information program, sorry. As part of the STEM Expo, we created a presentation, a display that students were able to learn more about amateur radio. They were also able to, as a part of their work with the science fair that's been operating since 1962, they create their own projects. They are shared literally with other students and other scientists from coast to coast. They have the opportunity to not only share in scientific activities, but cultural activities, social activities. It's very competitive. These are amongst the best science students that the nation has to offer. They compete for prizes, for medals, for scholarship money. We were able to enter our own STEM Expo exhibit and have an opportunity to share a a whole lot of what we can do with amateur radio with the students that were involved in the science fair. Shift now to our experiences since COVID in March. And really, our program has gone on somewhat of a pause, which is unfortunate, but when we couldn't get youth groups together, it made youth opportunities very difficult. There is one exception, and I'm very proud to share some information today from the Belleville Cadets in Belleville, Ontario. I want to read to you what I received from Matthew Batten, VE3ZQW, in an email the other day. Before I do, I want to, Matthew asked me to make sure that I pass along special thanks to both Phil McBride and to Al Penny for their work with their cadet groups during COVID to continue the momentum that they had received. This is what Matthew wrote to me. Since we last spoke, Belleville cadets were put on a national safety pause. At that point, I was 3/4 of the way through instructing an in-house basic course of 9 cadets plus 1 young adult. Thanks to RAC offering the initial virtual basic course, we were able to get these individuals trained. Of the 10, 5 were able to pass, with 5 more preparing for rewrite. Of the 5 who passed, 2 have been accepted to Royal Military College and have chosen engineering and signals for their degree or trade in the Canadian Forces. I have 3 that are planning on getting their CW endorsement, advanced qualifications, and MCOM training. I have stood up 2 additional cadet radio clubs, VA3 GFP, located at the Naval Reserve Division in Toronto on the HMCS York, and VA3 VBQ at the Ajax Ontario unit, sponsored by Brian Holmes. I am looking to stand 3 more units up in Ottawa, Niagara, and Port Hope prior to the new year. Belleville will be considered the main station with the high power facilities and tower. I have been supplying a majority of the equipment for my own gear as we are still lacking in budget despite the success. VA3 GFB has 1 officer, an electrical engineer, and 1 cadet on the current basic course. I'm pushing for this to become a regionally directed activity from our command staff, and this idea seems to be gaining traction. I'll be able to accomplish more once our safety pause tentatively ends on 1 October. We have officially linked up with the local Quinte Amateur Radio Club and are planning joint activities and training. One of our female cadets will be submitting an article to TCA regarding her experiences on the course, as well as what our cadet groups are doing and accomplishing with amateur radio. It's been a very successful venture so far, and it seems to be resonating very well with our demographic. And I got to tell you, as much as I thought that COVID would really put a pause on our YEP program, that truly isn't the case, according to Matthew. It's so encouraging to see that once there is momentum and once youth are excited and interested, see a point to amateur radio in their lives, it's nice to see how the momentum can continue despite the obstacles that COVID could possibly present. Unfortunately, ARIS really went into a bit of a postponement or cancellation as most of the schools or youth groups had to avoid times that they could get together for this. We switched to what we called a community-based multi-point telebridge system. There were no direct contacts, but there still was an opportunity to create some radio contacts. I was approached by ARIS and asked if I could get a community group together. I work with a group in Airdrie called the Airdrie Space Science Club, kids who come together to build and launch model rockets, to launch high altitude balloons, to communicate via the ARIS program with the space station, but also to use amateur radio to develop their skills and their interests in science in general. A multi-point, where generally a telebridge is one group getting together, sitting around the telephone and connecting in through a telephone line to the ground station. A multi-point meant that each of these participating individual youth were at home connecting back into a conference call. It creates a wide multitude of potential fail points. But boy, oh boy, it's exciting when they can actually carry out. I want to show you a short video, about a 9-minute video. I'm watching the time here. That was developed after our contact with the space station. In the picture here, you see Chris Cassidy talking or preparing to talk on the radio. This was a nice surprise video that was developed after our contact, while we sat on Earth listening to the radio, or listening to the sounds that were coming back through the ground station. This is what it looked like on Chris Cassidy's side. So I want to share you this video as a real highlight to what the AIRS program can still do during COVID. Let's see if we can get this to work.
It's just this peaceful place.
No audio? I'm going to pause for a second. Good to go, Paul?
Yeah, just getting audio only.
Oh, just getting audio only. Okay.
Yep. If you do a new share, and then just put the video into the new share.
Not able to see this, Paul?
No.
Well, I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. I was sure we had this.
You drop the, if you do a new share under your sharing window, you should be able to run it.
Let's try this.
Yep, there, you had it there, almost.
We'll just try to reboot this. My apologies for the delay, ladies and gentlemen. Seems to be sucking up all my bandwidth. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on, I'm going to add the link to the chat box and give you an opportunity to take a look at that on your own if you're interested. Yeah. My apologies. I had it all loaded up and ready to go. It just seems to be taking forever to share. So I'm just going to head back to the PowerPoint, and then I'll add that link into the chat box for you. Either way, with the AIRS program, the opportunities on a community level for clubs to participate became very limited, and we're finding right now that there's a backlog in the AIRS program as we try to reschedule schools that are slowly starting to get back into normal activities. But there's still opportunities for Canadian programs or Canadian youth groups or schools to jump into the queue. The queue is a little long. It takes a year or so to get from application to the actual contact, but well worth the opportunity. If this is something that you in your community or a school or youth group are interested in, please get in touch with me or take a look at aris.org and sign up, get the application in. We'd love to get you into the queue and get everything started. What we're noticing as well is that there's tending to be more of a focus on family or cohort activities within the youth education program in AIRS. So opportunities for those smaller cohorts to participate as well. With great scientific luck and success over the next little while, we will get out of COVID. And we are very excited to return to our regular group activities. But we're also looking forward to perhaps engaging in some new youth education program activities, ideas, incorporating some new opportunities for our youth and getting things moving for them to continue their interest in amateur radio and science. One idea that was presented just recently is to try to be able to recognize the RAC Youth Amateur of the Year. Some way that we can recognize individual youth amateur radio operators or youth groups for the dedication that they have shown to amateur radio throughout the year. Perhaps something that we can take a look at in the next little while. Would love to be able to share their successes with people across the country. We're looking at ways that we could possibly increase on-air participation, ways that we could get youth more involved in radio communications. We'd love to see them participate more in all different modes of radio, including participation, as I've seen in the past, in field day activities. And let's look for ways that we can get more and more youth in. It's starting to get some momentum. Would love to see that continue. We would love to also see youth get involved in contesting as much as we possibly can, and perhaps the opportunity to sponsor a special contest for youth. There is a potential for youth to participate in some of the youth on the air, the Jamboree on the air or on the internet activities, and perhaps even the opportunity to have our own special event station just dedicated to Canadian youth and find a way to connect them up coast to coast. Would also love to see an increased opportunity for them to explore and to use some of the new modes such as SDR, such as D-Star, some of the other kind of emerging technologies that tend to interest students a lot more. The potential exists quite strongly for these emerging technologies to draw youth in. Recently, we became aware of a opportunity as the world tends to move towards the moon and then ultimately towards the Mars. Space agencies are really starting to focus on something called the Lunar Gateway. This is an opportunity for a modified space station to orbit the moon. It will become the foundation for future exploration into our solar system and could be the launching platform as astronauts move off into Mars and beyond. Radio amateurs around the world were asked to help design and build the amateur radio equipment that will allow communications between Earth and that gateway. This would be somewhat similar to what they're doing right now with AIRS on the International Space Station. but it would also be expanded to include some video or television signals, some student experiment data to be able to be transmitted to and from the gateway. A huge opportunity for people to kind of develop a brand new and very exciting application for amateur radio. It really is neat to be able to see into the stars and beyond the moon and watch the use of amateur radio as we begin that journey beyond our own planet. We've had a recent call for more visuals, things that kids can see, and the idea of, can we find more ways to incorporate images and video from the ISS or from space in general, somewhat similar to the slow scan TV or the ham TV that's been used recently. We're looking for more of those ways that we can get students and youth more involved in these kind of technologies. And this is where I leave it up to you. I'm going to ask for your suggestions, your ideas, the things that you think that we could or should be doing to try to develop our youth through amateur radio. I know there are a variety of opinions and ideas. Would love to hear from you. Paul, I'm going to turn this over to you now to perhaps moderate if you're watching the chats and the Q&A. I'm just curious if any of our participants have any suggestions or ideas that we could use to develop the interest of youth across the country.
Thank you very much, Brian. Excellent presentation, very interesting. Just as a side note to everybody, there is some plans to look at running another basic course in October month. So L. Penny will be looking at doing that out of Nova Scotia. So it's a case where keep an eye on the RAC website. So if you're involved with youth groups or cadets in particular, keep an eye out for that, and we can probably get more youth involved in actually looking at, trying for their license. We've got Brian. I don't know if you can actually scroll through the chat there. There's some comments from several members that said, Brian Bigley says, it strikes me as adults, we have a tendency to focus on things that are that we want to do rather than what they want to do. We've seen adults tell youth that FT8 isn't real radio. From an education standpoint, where do we see this going?
I have to agree that we oftentimes want to kind of protect the traditional use of radio, and as you know what, that absolutely is the key foundation of who we are and what we do. But we're starting to, just as often as we're starting to see those technologies develop, so too we need to develop those opportunities for students. So now, not necessarily just using traditional radio equipment, even though that really is important that kids have that chance to see our use of that equipment. We also need to be able to broaden our horizons, broaden our perspectives, and find some of those new cutting edge ways of introducing radio to kids. Again, something as simple as the SDR, the D-Star technologies. Traditionally through ARIS, I have to say that I was thrilled to be able to hear the signals coming from the International Space Station via the equipment that was right there in front of me. It was exceptional to be able to do that, and I had done it a few times, but that's not always possible. It's not always something that can be done through schools and through youth facilities. So thus comes the change over to telebridges. And we've seen a huge increase in the requests for telebridges because they're more flexible, because they don't have to rely on limited passes over top of your area of the International Space Station, and the difficulty to schedule those, and then rely on around 10 different ground stations. It's exciting, it's thrilling, but it's bringing a lot of youth and the attention of people to the AIRS program and to amateur radio activities. So we need to do our best to expand beyond our traditional ideas, see what we can do for the kids.
There's a question there from Ken. He says, you're great. Your demonstrations of all the activities that are on the go are excellent. What's your sense of the conversion rate from, demonstrations to actual licensed amateurs?
We haven't been collecting the data on that, but it's something that we want to do soon. Now that we've got more youth involved, and the stories that Matthew shared today, I think that we can start gaining some of those numbers and the data that we need to be able to convert, or to be able to share those conversion rates. I can't say for sure. I'm hoping, crossing my fingers, that those activities are kind of building up. The more groups that we include in the youth education program, I think the more stories that we'll hear, similar to Matthew's, where our youth are going the full duration and finding ways to get their basic qualifications, and then to hopefully expand into advanced areas as well. I see a question here about youth interested in Morse code. It's one of the areas that we haven't done a ton, simply because they've kind of dropped the Morse code requirement, but we're starting to see more and more of Canada's youth get involved from just a purely interest sake. And it's exciting to see kids think this is really neat to be able to do this. And through an option course that I have at my school, kids are kind of experimenting with Morse code, but we haven't gone into developing any kind of CW qualifications at all.
Just a comment from Carol. Says she volunteers at Scouts Canada and was at the Jamboree last year, and that CW was probably the most popular activity, as you alluded to. And you said you could see the Scouts actually doing Morse code with their flashlights in the evening, back and forth to each other. So that's nice to see.
Yeah, it's good to know that there's an interest. Now we just need to find ways that we can develop that interest, and perhaps there's some activities out there that our youth will jump onto.
Yeah, there's a query from Alex. What do you think of not just focusing on youth, but focusing on families and being able to organize activities at a family level?
I think the idea of the longer that COVID exists and the more limited youth opportunities are, I think that focus on family and cohorts will be exactly that. That maybe having a local amateur radio operator share their skills with youth groups might not be on the horizon for a while, but having our program look for ways that, indeed, just like you said, ways that we can share that with families or cohorted families, find ways that we can get adults to share that with their children, with their grandchildren. And maybe there's a way that we can kind of keep the momentum rolling, keep the things that have been working well, keep them rolling throughout families, especially if it looks like COVID might continue for a while longer.
Troy says that he's really interested in making contact with more people in the cadet program. He said he's just trying to get a club started and get the ideas rolling with making it more nationally directed. He said he thinks that that'd be a fantastic idea if we can get the cadet movement more involved.
Yeah, I agree, Troy. I think that there is a real opportunity to connect groups together. If you want to send me an email, ve6jbj@rac.ca, I can try to facilitate some of the things that you want to do and do my best to connect up. There are a number of cadet groups other than the one that is in Belleville that we could perhaps try to make some links and connections.
I don't have any other further questions coming in. There are various comments showing up in the chat that feel, Ken is saying that we feel like RAC should be putting more emphasis in the STEM related projects. I know that we have done that, but there seems to be more emphasis on the ecoms and the Aries type things versus the STEM type and youth projects that are, that we need to be doing to get more youth actually involved in the hobby.
Yeah, I think, you know what, as we start to gain some momentum and we have kind of a groundswell of ideas that perhaps we'll see more and more of that. One of the things that we've tried to do, and again, thanks to Alan Griffin through the TCA, is share ideas of things that we had developed at the RAC level, some of the things that we had seen as successes, and try to share as many of those ideas. But now we're starting to see, especially as Matthew had said in his message, the opportunity to highlight the excellent work that youth are doing, and maybe that kind of inspires other youth groups and other perhaps cadet groups or scout groups or amateur radio clubs to be able to get more involved. So the more that we share, the more those ideas start to spread, and that excites me. I'm looking forward to that.
I'm just getting a notification from the host organizer here. There's about 2 or 3 minutes left. So if there are last comments there that you'd like to make, Brian?
You know what? I'm really excited by the work that people are doing, but I do need to pass along a couple of reminders that come from executive. Really, these youth education program comes because of the donations and the funding that comes from club donations. They're really important. And as we start to get more interest, hopefully more grant money will be available to continue the momentum that youth and school groups are gaining. So we do appreciate all of your club donations. Also as well, grants and scholarships that are made available for individuals who are participating in amateur radio programs also come from your generous donations. And then just another reminder that if you haven't been on the RAC site to the Youth Education Program section, there are tons of ideas and lots of links that support a variety of youth activities. If you've got ideas of your own that you want to share with the people, there's an opportunity there to submit ideas to me, and we'll make sure that they get up on the website for everybody to see. If there are no other questions or comments, I'm grateful for the opportunity to share what's going on with our youth across the country. And if you want to continue the conversation, ve6jbj@rac.ca. Would love to hear from you more. Down in the chat, I also shared the link for that video if you want to see that, because it's thrilling to be able to see the ARIS work that's being done on behalf of youth. And with that, I say thank you and wish you a good day, and wish you 7-3 from Lethbridge, Alberta.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, there was one quick question from Ken Oakley. He's asking if your science club is going to be going this year. You might want to email him.
Yeah, I know Ken very, very well. In fact, Ken got me started in 2004 as my examiner. And as it said in my bio for this session, that it was Ken that got me started and started me down this journey. In fact, all of our ARIS direct contacts come as a result of Ken's mentorship and leadership and youthfulness, excitement in getting kids on the radio and connected up to the station. So I'll get in touch with Ken soon.
Okay, great job there, Brian. Thank you very much. I gotta pop off to another session.
You bet. Thanks, Paul. I appreciate everything and wish you a good day. We'll catch up to you later.
Same to you, and don't
Thanks.
forget, end the meeting.
You betcha. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.